Can you tell which eye has $70 eyeshadow palette and which eye has a $12 eyeshadow palette? Let's compare the Patrick Ta Major Dimension 2 palette, $70, with the Revolution Beauty True Icon palette, $12 at Ulta. They really went for it. I saw the swatches of the shimmers on their Instagram and I was immediately intrigued because they looked really, really beautiful, smooth and shiny, almost kind of like indie brands. And when I saw it was $12, I knew I had to try it and then compare it to the Patrick Ta palette. They even did the 2 cream shades. Now, some of the tones are slightly different, specifically with the shimmers, but the mattes are pretty on par. And as much as I was very hopeful and excited for the shimmer shadows, I wasn't really expecting much in terms of the mattes. From personal experience, I'm always let down with drugstore brand matte eyeshadows. I just don't think they give me the opacity that I want, the layering and the blendability that I kind of love and expect from my matte shadows. So I'm going to insert some close-ups of the shimmers so you can get an idea on like texture, finish, etc. And they're very, very similar. I think some of them are a little bit different in opacity. So some of them from the Patrick Ta palette are a little bit more sheer, but it really could be just a matter of building them up more and vice versa. This shade is for sure different in terms of color. However, texture-wise, they feel a little bit similar, I'm not gonna lie. Also would like to point out the Patrick Ta shimmer shades have hard pan on me, so rubbing my finger in there, they're a little bit on the thicker, creamier side, just a little bit, not like in a squishy way, but they do have that sparkle. Now the shades in the Revolution Beauty palette, they have also a little bit more of a creamier feel to them, so I will be very interested to wear test those because I do have hooded oily lids and I tend to have creasing issues. So texture wise they are a little bit similar but also a little bit different. So let's get into the demo of this look where I used both palettes, same shade from each palette, and then I'll give you some of my initial thoughts at the end of the video. So let's get right into it. Primed with this Ulta Beauty eyeshadow primer, and I'm going to be using the same set of brushes per palette, but I will be only keeping them to each palette. These are the brushes, they're the Refer brushes. I'm going to be using the 13, the 13 mini, the 28, and the 03. This side will be Patrick Ta and this side will be Makeup Revolution. So starting off with the Patrick Ta side, I am dipping into this deepest matte shade. I'm not going to be using the creams as I do have hooded oily lids, so they're probably just going to end up creasing immediately. So I'm just gonna pop this on the outer corner to kind of deepen out first. And sometimes I do the order differently on how I apply my eyeshadow, but predominantly this is kind of how I go about it. These are definitely super, super pigmented. And then I'm gonna take the Refer 13 and I'm gonna take this rosy shade. And I'm gonna run that right into it and then into the inner corner and up into the crease. And a little bit on this outer corner as well. And I'm taking this cream shade, still on the Refer 13 brush, and I'm going to take that on the outer edges out here. I do have a little bit of fallout. As for the shimmer, I'm kind of in between, honestly, all of these. This one on the lid, and then I'll use this one on the inner lid. And this is Refer 28 brush. And I don't know if you could see from holding up the palette, but some of the shimmer shades have hard pan on me. But I think that usually isn't an issue if you're using a brush. So I'm just going to put that kind of in the center of my lid, going into the outer corner. And then taking the Refer 03 brush and this shade. A brush, and I did mist it just with some water, and I'm gonna put that on the inner. And the shade is definitely darker than the shade in the Makeup Revolution palette. I think that'll be pretty obvious once I do the other eye. This is more like a champagne, while the other one is more like a lighter cream beige. Moving on to this eye, same order of shadows, and I am so curious to see how these apply. I just always assume that the more drugstore kind of mattes tend to be more sheer and buildable. But so far that is applying very nicely. And I'm going to bring it a little bit underneath my lower lash line as well. Switching into the 13 brush, I'm picking up the shade, the rosy shade, and I'm doing the same thing as I did on the other eye. And I actually feel like this is kind of maybe blending a little bit easier. I feel like the Patrick Ta shade kind of stuck down a little bit, which could have been the primer. Taking the cream shade, and I'm just going to take that on the outer edges into the inner corner, just blending everything together. I do kind of want to go back in and just kind of put more of that deeper shade out here. Tone wise, I feel like there's maybe just a little bit of difference between the tones. Like I can see more of that peachy light cream shade here versus this one. I think this one was a little bit more subtle, and maybe if I go in with a little bit more, I'll bring it in. But generally speaking, I think that they blended together a little bit differently. Onto the shimmer, I'm picking up this duochrome. Did mist my brush just like on the other eye, and that is applying honestly better. Like really, I think this is on par. I think this one was maybe a little bit different in the particle size, but that looks pretty good to me. Refer number 3, misted my brush with just some water, and I'm gonna put that right in here. And it's definitely lighter. And that is applying very nicely. But they look actually very similar on the lid. That's interesting. I feel like in the swatches, this one definitely, let me build up a little bit more. This one definitely look a little bit lighter in the swatches. Here is Patrick Ta. Here's Makeup Revolution. If I was to walk out with this eye look, I don't think anyone would have known that I would use 2 different eyeshadow palettes, which is pretty amazing. Very, very similar. Whatever Revolution Beauty is doing over there, this is it. This is it. I need more like this, more palettes. Like they do have a couple of different color stories. However, they seem to have more of a different type of variety of textures in there. So some of the shades in those palettes look like they're these shimmers, but some of them look like they're a little bit different. So I'm a little hesitant to try those out, but definitely this is making me want to try it out. These shimmer shades for a drugstore brand are just an absolute knockout. I'm really, really impressed with the mattes as well. I would actually go as far as to say that I do prefer the shimmers in this palette to the Patrick Ta palette. So far, they were just easier to use, and I do have to do a wear test, so I will be using the palette this week when I'm going into work in the morning, so I'll get a good 12-hour wear test. So I will keep you updated and pin a comment to let you know how the shimmer shades wore. That's definitely a concern for me, but I can just tell they're not as squishy and emollient or anything like that. A little bit more butteriness to them, so I think that they might crease, but like after 4 hours, not within 30 minutes. I do really like the Patrick Ta mattes. I do think they're similar, but they have a little bit more of like a denseness to it. So I would say they're a little bit more opaque upon first application, which I do really love mattes that are like that. I can't speak on the creams. I'm not really going to be using cream shadows like this. They don't seem to be the type to set down. So as someone with hooded oily lids, that's just going to be disastrous. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be getting use out of these. And if you're in the same boat as me and you don't really want to use cream shadows like that, I would say this is a better value. That personally doesn't bother me as much as not using 2 shades from a $70 palette. And the shimmers in here, they're really nice, really beautiful, but as I mentioned, they're a little bit hard panned, which I'm not the biggest fan of for a $70 palette. But let me know in the comments below if you picked any of these palettes up and what you think of them. I would love to hear your thoughts. And if you enjoyed this video and you love tutorial content, you love reviews, then there will be some other videos up on the screen for you to check out. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.